You're listening to the B&H Photography Podcast. For over 40 years, B&H has been the professional source for photography, video, audio, and more. For your favorite gear, news, and reviews, visit us at bnh.com or download the B&H app to your iPhone or Android device. Now here's your host, Alan Weitz.
Welcome to the B&H Photography Podcast. Before we begin, a quick reminder to tweet us at BH Photo Video with the hashtag BH Photo Podcast and rate us on iTunes. We love doing the show, and your comments go a long way in helping us fine-tune our efforts in making it better. Today, John Harrison and I will be talking with Lois Greenfield and Omar Z Robles, two photographers who visually interpret the art of dance in uniquely different ways. Lois Greenfield began back in the early 70s, initially covering the experimental dance movement scene for the Village Voice. She has photographed the performers of a number of dance companies, including Alvin Ailey and the American Ballet Theater, and her unique approach to photographing the human form in motion has influenced a generation of photographers. Since 2014, Lois has been an artist-in-residence at NYU Tisch Department of Dance and New Media, and last year she was honored with the Dance in Focus Award in recognition of her contributions to the field of dance photography. She's also the author of 3 best-selling books, Breaking Bounds, Airborne, and Lois Greenfield, Moving Still. Omar Z Robles learned the art of body movement from a master of the craft, the legendary mime Marcel Marceau. As a photographer for the Chicago Tribune, Metro San Juan, and Latino leaders, he has extensive experience photographing celebrities, athletes, artists, politicians, and an assortment of city dwellers. But what he's best known for is his knack for outdoor dance photography, in which he has fused the lessons he has learned from the king of mime with his keen sense of street culture. Omar's work has appeared on Mashable, The Huffington Post, The Daily Mail, and Harper's Bazaar, and he has 188,000 Instagram followers. He's also an official Fujifilm X-Photographer, and he has photographed for The Gap, Apple Music, and Esquire magazine. Welcome, both of you. Sometimes it's easier than others.
That's all the time we have for today, folks.
Good night. Thank you for all tuning in here. Okay. I'd like to start by asking each of you how you got into dance photography, because it's really a niche kind of a market. And it's I imagine it's not the easiest one to break into, because the people who do dance must be very particular about how they are portrayed. That's what I would assume. You've got a lot of egos going on here and stuff like that. And there's a precision, and it's an art and a craft. Lois, can you give us a little bit of a background?
Well, I virtually stumbled into dance photography. I was a newspaper photographer when I graduated from college and was covering, riots and demonstrations of the early 70s and rock and roll people and authors that came to Boston where I was working. And one of the assignments I was given, one of the beats I was given, was to photograph dancers. And I discovered that I actually enjoyed the experience of photographing something that only had to be visually interesting and not tell a story.
Did you expect it to be that way? When you first heard dance, were you like, oh, okay, is it just dance? Or was it something that kind of sparked you from the beginning?
No, it was just, one subject or another. And I was really just cutting my teeth in photography altogether. I never studied it, so I just had a camera and went out. And
when did you know that this is it? This is what I want to do?
Pretty much the last year of college when I started.
Okay, so you go way back with this one.
Yeah, I go way back.
If you didn't study it, how did you get your first job? How did you roll into being a news photographer?
Well, it was kind of easy in Boston, which was a city really run by kids back then. And so I had actually started taking photographs as a teenager on community service projects in an Apache Indian community in the States and in South America. And so that became the basis of my portfolio. I mean, actually, I wanted to be an anthropologist or an ethnographic filmmaker, and I was drawn to those kind of tribal cultures, and that was the portfolio I went with, and then I was told to go shoot the Rolling Stones.
Another tribe. Well, it's really funny you say tribal anthropology. In a sense, I could see a lot of your photographs being quite similar to tribal photography in a sense. If you think of like Irving Penn going out into, the wild and setting up a backdrop and having all of these.
I love that book.
Yeah, and in a sense, a lot of your stuff is similar to that in a way. I could see how those pictures side by side would not jar each other. They might even blend. It's
great.
Omar, what about yourself? How'd you stumble into this?
So as you mentioned, my background initially before photography, I was actually a professional mime, and I started with Marcel Marceau. When I started doing photography, to make the long story short, when I moved to New York, I started doing street photography, and the place where I was mostly posting my work and publishing my work was Instagram. And trying different things, at some point I was missing my performance days, so I started to put myself into the pictures. And this series actually started with shooting myself jumping in midair, and the idea was to try to capture the idea of defiance of gravity and just weightlessness, basically. So I started putting the camera on a tripod, or actually it was the phone at that time. I would just put my phone in a small tripod and then like jump in the middle of the street and do different things. And I met with a dancer here in New York that was doing something similar, and I shot with her, and then afterwards I started shooting with her friends and friends of her friends, and basically that's sort of how it started. And then over the course of I think about a year of working with the series, it started getting picked up by media, and that's when the Instagram blog did a blog post about it, and then Mashable did a little bit of a story about it, and then sort of the audience started gravitating to that content that I was creating more. So I thought I decided to just take advantage of that wave and then just like dive deep into it.
Are some dancers better in front of a camera than others? Are there some people that just don't function well in front of a camera? Do they need to be on a stage with that whole setting? Or
Well, it depends what the photographer wants. I mean, I'm not looking for theatricality when I invite a dancer to my studio. I'm looking for their own free expression. I'm looking to free them from choreography and leave all those positions and arabesques and pas de chas and all that, outside of our little sandbox. I like to think of my studio as a sandbox where we can just play, and the dancers can invent movements and experiment with how their body works, independent of any kind of choreography. And of course, they know I'm just catching one split second out of an entire phrase of movement, because I have a manual Hasselblad camera, which I have to wind in between each shot. And so there's no chance for continuous action or, rapid fire shooting. I go for one split second, which we then often repeat. So I'm asking them to draw on their own, to self-create the moment, so to speak. I mean, I never tell them exactly what to do. And my interest in the whole process after all these years is the discovery that comes that ends up beyond my imagination. So in other words, I'll be clear about that. A lot of photographers have an idea on a layout or a position or some predetermined visual that they want to realize in the photo. I come in with no idea and maybe a bunch of props, often dancers I've never worked with, because I don't want them to give me what they think I want, and I just want them to be themselves. And what the interest for me then is to see what develops. And then it's a 50% collaboration, because I'm directing and guiding them, their gestures or their expression or their position relative to other people. At the same time, they're just doing spontaneous combustion split seconds. And of course, we're adding all these props and mirrors and scarves. And also, I don't know where I'm going when I start the process. And if I did know what the picture would look like, I wouldn't bother taking it.
Can I ask, so you say that you don't direct them necessarily, but let's say you saw something in what they were doing before you clicked that image. Will you then say, you know what you did right before that is kind of what I'm looking for. Can you repeat that, or you don't do that?
No, I do. That's what happens. I'm kind of like surveying and mining, and all of a sudden there's the geyser that, okay, this has potential. And it may be perfect, because the more spontaneous something is, the fresher and more magical it appears. So then I'll find something and I'll say, let's keep doing this again. And I might urge them to soften their hands, soften their face, never look at the camera, pretend that they have a purpose to what they're doing. So I want it to look like there's a thought and that there's a reason for what they're doing, even though we're not privy to what it is, because it's just sort of more an ambiguous and enigmatic moment. But what makes it more complicated is when we add props.
Yeah.
So we're throwing fabrics or styrofoam balls or feathers or glitter or whatever. And it's kind of exciting, because the photographer director, although I'm saying I'm not directing, but I'm guiding, is one aspect. But then there's the chance element of where these fabrics are going to land. And will the dancer throw it, or will an assistant throw it? Will there be a fan? And then the timing, because timing in dance photography is so important. And, of course, all dance photographers have to anticipate the moment and click the shutter on the assumption that the subsequent split second will resolve itself in a way, that's really interesting.
Omar smiling.
So,
He must know that pretty well.
so to add the chaos of fabrics and everything, I find very exciting. And it's also a good balance between the control that all photographers kind of want and then the fact that the rest of it's in the hands of the gods.
My follow-up question is, let's say that you don't get the moment that you wanted, and you've tried and you've tried to try. Do you have a kind of an internal way of saying, okay, we'll pass, it's over, I'm not going to go for it any longer, or do you just keep going?
It's hard to say. I mean, it depends on the mood. I think the most important factor is the dancer getting tired? A dancer will never tell you they're tired in all these years. So there's a kind of an arc of energy. The first shot is usually spontaneous and wonderful. And you want that shot, but you wished it were a little different. So you try to coax it into that same fresh spontaneity, but with all the gestures and everything the way you want it. But after a number of times doing it, you're not going to get it. So that's on a different token. The more a dancer does something and the more tired they get, the more relaxed they get. And then sometimes it's fresher too. So, what's your experience when you're on the street with them? Because you're more constrained also by the fact that you're in
that there are
public
cars coming by.
space.
Well, and also, during your presentation at Optic a few weeks ago, you mentioned the fact that you often have very small windows of time because you're working in the street, and the sun is at a certain point only just for a few moments, and you work with light that's bouncing off windows and stuff like that. So while Lois is working in a studio where the lighting is more or less contained, it could be 2 in the morning or 2 in the afternoon, it doesn't matter. You have very specific things where you are chasing the light.
Yep. I mean, in many occasions, yes, I am chasing the light, and I am sort of dependent of what's going to happen there. So I think a little bit opposed to what Lois does. I think I take more of a lead role in directing because I need to make the most of that time. So I cannot chance to see, okay, what are you going to come up with? What idea it's in your mind? So most of the time, I give them at least a cue or somewhere where we can start, and then I go through the process of which I think we all go through. It's like, okay, you did it this way. Maybe we can soften this. Maybe we can soften that. Maybe we can make this stronger and all that stuff. But I have to take advantage of the time that I have with that, for example, with that particular light.
Or before the traffic light changes.
Or before the traffic light changes, which happens a lot, So I have to try and make the best of that time, and because there's all those elements of sometimes danger.
Yeah. Did you ever find yourself in a situation, looking at your work, there's a lot with sunlight, and there's also stuff with the light is not shining. Did you ever get into a situation where the light was just horrible and you said, we're just calling it off today? Or do you just work with whatever you have?
No, not really. I mean, I work with whatever I have because I try to be as smart as I can in that sense. So I will try and book the sessions very early in the morning or later in the afternoon so that it's closer to where the light is more directional. I guess when I start getting discouraged by the light, I guess it's if I'm shooting in the morning and then it gets to the point where the sun is going a little bit higher, then that light just doesn't work for me anymore. And it's also hotter. For example, now in the summer it gets much hotter. So at that time I would just call it quits.
Winter is a much better time for you to work because the sun just never gets that high in the sky. It gets cold,
except for the bodies of the dancers.
Yeah. But before we started, it was interesting. We had a little dialogue going on here. Omar, you are strictly digital. You came into photography. It was a digital world.
Yes.
Okay. Lois, you started in film and have gone into digital. Do you find that we were talking before about spontaneity and all this other stuff and knowing when you got the shot or when it's working? With film, you didn't always have that. You did get a couple of test Polaroids, but when you were actually shooting, you didn't know what you had until the film came back. Now you can actually look at the screen. Or do you look at the screen? Do you keep working, or do you do one of these, keep
Yeah, I
Jumping
try
on
not to look at the screen, actually. And I don't, the screen is great in that it's a great communicator, so to speak, a means of communication with the dancers, because if I'm trying to give them direction, I could say, come take a look.
Right.
So they see what their face looks like. They say their leg is terrible. Their foot, of course, is always terrible no matter what, and so it's great for communication. But I need them to build up a certain momentum and continuity as they're jumping or whatever they're doing. So if they were to stop and look all the time, or I were to stop and look all the time, it wouldn't be productive. And the other thing is that, and this is true for all photographers, we have to engage with what's in front of the camera the moment we're shooting.
Yes.
If it's still life, it's fine. You can look at the monitor and adjust everything, and the glass will still hopefully be there. But I can't do that. So the photographers who rely on seeing the last shot to determine the next shot are really missing things.
Right.
And that's why also I don't use the continuous action function. I don't have one on my manual Hasselblad that I've had since the 80s. But I wouldn't want it because I want to make the decisive moment, and I don't want to give that to the camera to do it at every quarter of a second or eighth of a second or
10 frames per
or
second
10
or
frames
whatever
per
it is.
second.
Yeah.
I don't want them to determine the picture I want.
Can I jump in real quick to follow up on what is the camera you use and the digital back?
Yes, I use the manual 500 series Hasselblad, which I put on a tripod, and it's the same camera I've had since the 80s. I don't even have an image reverser on it because I actually don't have to look in the camera.
Right.
It's
That's
not
correct.
something where cropping used to be important. When I fell in love with this camera in the 80s, it was because of this square format. And all my pictures from the first two books that you mentioned all have that black border, and that was a dramatic element as well, as a compositional element. So the dancers were cropped, or they were in or out, or the square could make people seem confined, or it also expanded gravity, because gravity we know just goes up and down, but in a square format, if the dancers are busting out of the sides, you've got a gravitational pull.
Interesting.
That way as well. So I was obsessed with the square. My autobiography at that time would have been obsessed with the square. So now with the digital, I'm freed from that obsession, and I don't long for it. I think also, working in film and of that era, there was a certain bravado, or I'm not sure what the word is. There was a certain, I don't know, many photographers from
You can
that
swear.
era. No, we were hooked on the frame and the exquisite, perfect framing that didn't involve cropping and all that. So there was always that challenge of having the composition within the picture relate to the frame, and so that was very exciting. Now, of course, I'm frameless, and I don't shoot with any square, vertical, horizontal, any format in mind, and I can crop it as I wish. And I'm shooting in color, which is probably even a bigger change than the border.
And
Which you could always turn back to black and white if need be.
And when I started with a digital back, the first thing I tested was not what it looked like in color, but what kind of black and white file.
And what is the digital back?
I've used the Leaf digital backs and the Hasselblad digital
you
backs.
tried different.
And the other super important thing is my Broncolor strobe system, because I can stop motion I only need to stop it at 2,000th of a second. When I started, basically you had a 500th of a second.
That was the top sync speed of the Hasselblad lenses, correct? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's not the lenses, it's the duration of the strobe.
Oh, the strobe, correct. Yes.
The effective
I'm sorry.
duration, the effective exposure is not determined by the camera.
It's your flash
The flash.
duration.
If you're working in a studio, Omar
Yes.
has to talk to the son about that.
We're going to come to that.
Yeah.
Omar, you had a few other thoughts.
So I started shooting with Canon when I was starting in photography, and then when I discovered mirrorless, that really changed the way I shoot. Especially because with the mirrorless system, with the Fujifilm system specifically, which is with what I shoot, you can see the exposure right in the camera. And these cameras have become really smart, and the fact that I can, for example, those moments where the light is hitting a specific part of the city, I can really see it and manipulate it as to how I want the exposure to be in camera. So it has definitely cut off on my time of editing, for example, afterwards, because I can tweak everything in camera and see how it's going to be before I even get home and start looking through the shots.
I get that, so I routinely keep a thumb on the exposure compensation dial because, I said the correct exposure is not always the best exposure.
It's the exposure that you want.
Exactly.
It's the exposure that looks best. And, with perhaps, with other systems before, like regular DSLR, you have to keep going back and forth, and there's a lot of chimping involved because, you have to like shoot, look, and maybe I can adjust this or that. Whereas with the mirrorless system, with the Fujifilm system, I can look through the viewfinder, especially for example with the XT1, that the viewfinder is so big inside. Like you can look and then you can like pinpoint at everything that you want to with the exposure and change things. So when I was doing street photography, I really be able to make those adjustments really fast because I could see them
on the fly.
And and then that's exactly what I do still with when I'm shooting dance.
Do you have a lens of choice?
I shoot mostly with two. I shoot with 90 millimeter f2, which is equivalent to 135, and then with the 56 f1.2, that it's equivalent to 85.
Yeah, that's a great lens.
Most recently, I started shooting with the 56 APD, which is like specialized that has like kind of like circular ND filter. So it's a very subtle change, but I kind of like that it does like a little in-camera vignetting.
And you use the viewfinder or the LCD screen or back and forth?
I use both. It really depends. And like when there's too much distraction, then I go straight to the viewfinder because I can just like concentrate on that. But then sometimes I find myself detached from the camera a little bit. And especially when I have to do like lower shots, then I can just flip the screen up.
And never a tripod?
No, never a tripod. I mean, it's just a hazard in the city. Sometimes, to be carrying like that much extra. I cannot really set it up. Like by the time I set the tripod out, the car is coming and I have to get out of the street. Yeah. So I just like move in and out as much as I can. And
And how much of that aspect of it is your thrill, like the interacting with the traffic? Or if you could just block a street, would you prefer to do that, or do you like the thrill of the city?
I guess I like the thrill of the city for sure. I don't do it purposely that way. Because of the thrill, is just part of it. One of the reasons why I really shoot in the street is because, when you look at it, the buildings frame perfectly the dancers in many occasions. So that's mostly the reason why I do it, because I get to have like a pretty nice and interesting frame with the dancer in the middle of like leading lines and things like that. That you could not do it otherwise. Sometimes I would shoot on the sidewalk when I'm not too venturous or something like that, or when I just want to create a different look to it.
And do you keep like a running list of locations as you're wandering around the city and say this will be a great spot for the next time? Or
yes, I think from the time that I was shooting street photography all the time, I was walking a lot. And when I mean a lot, I was like almost going out every day for several hours. And I did that for about a year or a year and a half, that I was just going out every day, almost religiously going out almost every day. So I walked around like most neighborhoods, I guess most common neighborhoods. I wish I would have gone more to like, I guess, places in Brooklyn and the Bronx and stuff like that. But I guess the easier and more accessible places are like Midtown, Chinatown, Soho, and those different areas. So that's where I grasped more of that aesthetic. It was when I was shooting street photography. So I don't necessarily keep a list of the places that I like to shoot at, but I guess I do it unconsciously.
Lois was talking about going from that square format with the frames and how it was really part of her aesthetic. You're shooting with a camera that it's rectangular in format, and yet we were talking a bit earlier that most of your pictures, a great deal of them, end up being a square. How do you try to envision that square when you shoot, or are you just shooting using the whole screen and allowing for space? How is your mind process working when you're shooting?
Well, the square is not that much happening anymore, but the reason why it was a square was, again, because my publishing platform was Instagram.
Exactly,
and it still is. So back then, Instagram would only allow a square. So I think you could do it like in Fujifilm cameras. You can shoot in square format if you're shooting, and then if you're shooting JPEG and RAW, it will just keep the RAW in rectangular form, and then just have the square in the JPEG.
Did you use that
So
function?
I would use that function sometimes just to guide myself and make sure that everything was inside. What's interesting though is that many times, for example, when I was giving workshops and things like that, people would tell me like, oh, the square is so restricting, and why do you have to like restrict yourself to that? There's so much information that's outside of the frame. And I was says no, it's like the information that is there is the information that I want it to be. So I'm not missing anything out of the frame. Now, however, Instagram has changed and they allow for vertical and portrait, so landscape and portrait orientation. However, for example, portrait orientation will take more of the screen real estate. So by trial and error, you realize that you get much more engagement in pictures that take much more of the screen. So that's why I hardly now shoot in landscape, and I'm shooting more in portrait, because just by trial and error, I realized that portrait pictures take a little more the attention of the audience. And
with you shoot with the Fuji X system. What do you have? The XT.
So right now, I was shooting with the XT1 up to last year, then up to recently, and then the X Pro 2 came out, and now I'm shooting mostly with the X Pro 2.
Okay, and do you use their film simulations?
Yes.
And you try everything they have.
Yeah, I mean, I really love it, and Fujifilm, one of their biggest assets is the way they treat color, the way they work with color, and even the raw files themselves come out beautifully, that I don't have to do a whole lot. But at times I often shoot JPEG and RAW, because sometimes the JPEG just comes basically the way I wanted it, and then I just tweak it a little bit. Mostly I use Classic Chrome, that film simulation. But then because when you edit on Lightroom afterwards, if you're editing the RAW, you can also access those film simulations. I think Lightroom calls it camera profiles or something like that, but it is the same film simulation. So what I'll do is that sometimes when I want to give myself a little bit more of a playing space, or just like leeway, I guess that's the right word. When I want to give myself a little bit more leeway, then I edit the RAW, and then I start with usually the Classic Chrome or one of the other ones, and then I tweak it from there.
And Lois, if Instagram had been around when you were starting in this, would you have embraced it, you think? Would you have found that or do you embrace it now, I should ask?
Definitely, especially with the new book, Moving, still coming out. Yeah, we went into social media in a big way, and it's great. Yeah. It's really great.
Oh, good. Do you think about it when you're shooting, though? I mean, I can tell Omar, obviously, his work to some degree was influenced by the format.
Well, what's funny, though, is that when I started into Instagram, I did it very reluctantly. I started on Instagram, I think it was around 2011, more or less, maybe. And back then, I was shooting, professionally for OI and different organizations, and social media was a very new thing. So there was always the fear of image theft and copyrights and stuff like that. But at the same time, I told myself, yes, I'm working for some organizations, but this is not really my personal work. This is not stuff that drives me, that encourages me to do things that I want to do. And if I want my personal work to be seen, there's no one knocking at my door. So I just started publishing it, and with some fears, but I just went ahead and did it. And I remember my brother is a journalist as well, and he does photography, and we had a lot of fights in the beginning about he was telling me, you're just publishing too much of your work, you're putting too much of your work out there. Who's going to buy your work? Who's going to care about your work if you just put it out there? It's like, someone will, and
someone has 188,000.
There's another interesting thing. I mean, I'm all aboard with this Instagram, and I've had to get over the whole, people can drag it and that kind of thing, because it does work for us, more than it works against us. But when you're basically putting up your artwork in a very, inch by inch format, and I'm now printing prints that are 3 feet by 4 feet, and the whole experience of looking at a photograph that big, I see details now that I've printed them that big that I never realized were actually in the files that I shoot, because unless you blow it up, you don't really see it. So that's a disadvantage, I think, for us photographers, that our work is being shrunk to that size.
Right.
Yeah, and then I think one of the my biggest also things against Instagram in the beginning is the fact that people are seeing 1,000 or more pictures, like a second, I guess, when they're scrolling through a feed. So it sort of gives this ephemeral essence to the picture, to your work, because people are gonna click like or not, and then they see the following, the next picture. So that was, like, I guess, one of my gripes in the beginning, including the fact that also it was very small. But as technology advances and as our digital lives advance, then you sort of just adapt to it and realize that people are now experiencing media in general mostly through their phones. So there's nothing you can't do about it. I mean, some people go to galleries, but the broader audience will just experience media on their phones and through social media. So it's like either you go there or you don't. The fact that there's also a loyalty that you get from your viewers, that then, in my case, I post at the same time every day.
Okay.
And now it sort of doesn't matter because Instagram has changed their algorithm so that it's not chronological.
Right.
But still, people expect my picture to be at 11 p.m. at night on New York time every day. And the comments that I get constantly is like, I look forward to this time of the day to see your pictures, things like that. Because it's in your pocket, it's so accessible. It's really closer to people, so people don't have to wait to go to an art show, to a gallery, they can just have it with them and go back to it, because again, it's on your feed, on your Instagram feed.
Right.
So you can go back to it anytime you want.
We're going to take a short break. When we come back, we're going to find out how Lois manages to get 6 dancers in the sky at one time without having to wear crash helmets.
We hope you're enjoying this edition of the B&H Photography Podcast. Send us a tweet at BHPhotoVideo, hashtag BHPhotoPodcast.
Anybody who has not seen Lois's work, where she's shooting with 2, 3, 4, what's the top amount of dancers you've had in the studio at one time? At least 6 you've had, I know that.
Or more.
Or more. Now, I think it's something important to note is that when you look at these photographs, they look like they're composites. You have a half a dozen or more people in the air in perfect form, and there's no overlapping, and there's nobody crashing into each other. And I think it's important to note that you get all these in one take. This is not Photoshop magic. You're really capturing this. How do you prepare to do that? I look at your photographs, and I've looked at your pictures for years, and I just love your work. I'm amazed that you can pull this off without having all kinds of lawsuits and personal injury things going on. It's amazing. How do you set up for that? How do you prepare?
No one really gets hurt because the dancers know they're in control of their own bodies. We're not loading them into cannons and shooting them.
I love the image.
But maybe it's a good idea to try. But so they're in control of the movement from takeoff to landing. And what they do looks so impossible, but it's actually under their control because they're only working within their skill sets if they have gymnastic skills or something. So they can go up, they can go horizontal, and they can land. And that's also what fascinates me about this whole enterprise is that because of, I like to shoot things that the naked eye can't see.
Right.
So had you been there when I was shooting these, you just would have seen a big jumble of people flying or one person crashing or whatever. But by stopping it with this split second in a most unnatural position or in a confluence of shapes that seems impossible, then of course we look at it for as long as we want to look at it and say it's impossible, but it's not impossible. It's just not visible by the naked eye, but the camera can stop it. And that's what fascinated me the whole time. But getting back to the dancers is that they're in control of their bodies. They have great skills and love to experiment and create. So almost you can start anywhere and then with a little bit of guidance, get to where you want to be. But again, I don't ever have an end point that I'm trying to achieve. I'm looking for actually that unexpected moment, or maybe like the dancers are all jumping, they're entwined, and it's very graphic. But what if one dancer has started the jump on the 2 count instead of the 3 count, because you kind of count for them so they're more or less in the air at the same time. Just the fact that one of them might be descending while the others are ascending makes the picture that much more intriguing.
Gotcha.
And of course we do it, I won't say thousands of times, but we really, back with those contact sheets, I could have 20, contact sheets per one of these large
Are you
jumps.
doing less takes now that you're working digitally? Because again, we were talking earlier about film. Film, you didn't know. I mean, they were gone. It was the next day before you got the film back.
Yeah.
But
we
now
did know though. We knew.
you knew. Okay.
Knew. Whatever.
That is what's called being a professional, when you know.
But there's also a flash that goes off, and I couldn't tell you the details, and unlike Omar, I don't work alone because I do need people to make sure that the dancers are in the same place. Because there wasn't, and there still is no autofocus.
Right.
You pre-focus and tell them to be there.
Well, I say there's autofocus. You autofocus before you take the picture.
we run with a tape measure.
Right.
And
right.
we put a mark down.
Like a film shoot.
So it's really, it's counterintuitive and a very...
This kind of leads me to what was a big question I had, and obviously less so far, Omar, but about collaboration. And do you have, do you have an assistant director that you work with that will set somebody up? Are they from the dance world? This is a lot of questions. And I'm specifically about wardrobe and props. Do you have somebody that you've worked with all these years? Or is
I have a team, like photographic team, like Jack D'Azo, Alan, who you know.
Sure,
we worked together for a long time. And I think that kind of nonverbal communication between people on a set, I don't have to have eyes for all 6 people. I've got my
You're
team.
thinking as a unit.
Yeah, we are definitely thinking as a unit. What was another part of your question?
Well, I'm really curious about
the
wardrobe.
Wardrobe, yeah. I used to do dress rehearsals when I moved back from Boston, and I worked for the Village Voice, as you mentioned, the Times, and all these places. And I had to go to theaters and shoot the live action, which started to irritate me because I thought I'm shooting someone else's art form, and my art form is photography. I'm not there to document the dance. I'm there to make a merger between these two art forms. Make a hybrid of something that actually, as I will keep repeating, you don't see on a stage, and you could only see as a photograph. So at some point I had to transpose all that work in theaters where I had no control to the studio where I did have control. But the last thing I wanted to do was to replicate any form of dance vocabulary or poses. And so the first thing I did in the Breaking Bounds book was say, no costumes, no dance wear, just dance belts, just body, just make it sculpture. We're going to unleash Renaissance sculpture in the air kind of thing.
I think that's a perfect word for the work that you do, sculpture, no?
Yeah, I think so. So I never wanted wardrobe, because wardrobe connoted a theatrical performance or a specificity that I don't want in my pictures. I want you to look at it and make your own associations and not say, oh, that must be a princess or a Cinderella or whatever that is. So what I do have is just fabrics. I love to throw fabrics and go and collect all kinds of garbage, whether it's shredded paper or glitter, or I go to a floral supply store and get styrofoam balls. And then we kind of test them out before. We just throw them and experiment throwing fabrics. And
that's a treat.
And it's magic. It's definitely like alchemical.
Something that struck me looking at some of your newer work, when you have long fabrics and things of that sort, it reminded me of the work of Howard Schatz, who I really, really appreciate his work. He's doing it underwater, and he's got the the thermodynamic, whatever, the water dynamics of carrying this fabric and having it flowing, which is natural because it's floating. You're capturing that without water. And there's a fluidity to the imagery, which is just magical to it. And I looked at a lot of your early work, and I see what you're doing right now, and it's just I'm using the word flow. It's a beautiful flow from one form to the other, and the magic is still there. It's really interesting. Do you approach this differently than your earlier work when it was just the human form? Now you've got the human form interacting with these flowing fabrics and powders and all kinds of other things happening. How do you approach it? Is it any different?
Well, now it's one person against a dark background with one light that throws a lot into shadow. And more of what I'm calling these enigmatic and ambiguous moments of becoming. I feel when I look at my new series, which my nickname is 1-to-1 because they're supposed to be big and it's a direct confrontation between what the dancer's doing and the person viewing it, as opposed to looking at more like a 16 by 20 inch print or 20 by 24 inch print. And that now seems to be more like a document of something that happened. But at the larger scale, I feel that I'm looking at something happening before my eyes. So it's almost the opposite of this slicing time into, split seconds. It's still a very thin slice of time, but I feel that it looks very fluid.
Gotcha.
I love this quote that, I'm sorry to interrupt, but it was, dance is the ostensible subject of my work, but the subtext is time. I mean, and I think it's pretty clear when you see your work that time is what we're talking about.
And dancers give time that, the dancers with fabrics give
flowing fabrics.
give them, a substance and materiality to the passage of time. Obviously, if you're working outside in sunsets or sunrises, you see time passing, but in a studio situation, you don't. And I think I was drawn to the fabrics in part, looking at looking at the work of Barbara Morgan, who did iconic pictures of the Martha Graham Company from the 30s on. And I had the good fortune to interview her back in my newspaper days. And I looked at that famous picture she has of Martha Graham, which is, she's doing an arabesque.
Oh, yeah.
And there's the skirt going up. And I realized if the dancer weren't wearing the skirt, by throwing the skirt up, you see the passage of time. You know the arc of fabric, and the picture can show you then what happened before they clicked the camera. Without the fabric, all you have is a very static arabesque. So I started to throw the fabric. So I realized how the movement of fabrics, either if they're thrown or we have a fan moving or whatever, can help convey the passage of time. And another way to convey the passage of time is not to take the alleged peak moment, but to take people about to hit or descending from something. And that's actually the most important thing in my work.
Because it loses that momentum at the apogee.
It's dead at the apogee.
It's dead,
It's either striving up or it's gently going down, and then there's a whole narrative that can accompany it.
That's something that I actually find very interesting, because in my work, I try to get to that, climax point, to that higher point, because what fascinates me about when I'm working with dancers is precisely the amazingness that these people can achieve with their bodies, something that they have been working for ages, years and years and years of work to be able to hit that arabesque at that certain point, hit that attitude at that point, hit that, so the Shah at a specific way. So that's what I'm personally trying to capture, is that precise moment, because I could do that at some point in my life. So I identify with that moment where it's something that I felt in my body, and we would say, when it is right, it feels right, and that's something that is a very primal feeling that you feel nowhere else but in your flesh, in your muscles, and that's what I'm trying to capture. So it's very interesting how different photographers can see things or try different things, where I want that moment. I want that I don't want to call it perfection, because it's not perfection. The beauty of it is that it's a split second when that happens,
Right.
and you really have to be,
You have to be there for it,
there. And going back to one of the points that we were mentioning at some point before, is that in theater, in photography, as opposed to the theater, or when they're on stage, those moments are hardly ever seen. You see them in passing, but you never really are able to freeze them.
That's
and
the magic of photography.
And that's the magic of photography, to be able to really capture that moment where it's like a prized moment that you have been working for all of your life, to be able to reach that prime, that your muscles look at at their best. So yeah.
You coming from a dance background and a mime background, very similar, obviously, and you're coming from a photo reportage. I'm sensing that that's maybe what you see, and you're more interested in this moment before and after in the story, and you're more interested in that moment right there. Do you think there's a connection with your own past and your own work as a dancer? And then my other question is about communicating with your dancers. I'm curious to know if you work with specific dancers multiple times, and also how you get them to do what you might want them to do. I realize that in some cases you're letting them do their thing and you're working around them, but there has to be a communication back and forth. And are you comfortable with all the dance terms you need to be, and are they comfortable with the photography terms, and how does that communication happen?
Going back to one of the first questions that you made, Alan, when you asked, are some dancers better in front of the camera or not? It's not that some of dancers are better or not in front of the camera, but
Well, more comfortable maybe is a better word to use.
perhaps for me, the dancers that I find are better to work with is people that have initiative. It's dancers that I am very comfortable with the dance terms, but as a photographer, there's also many other things that you're looking at. In my case, I'm looking at traffic, I'm looking at lights, I'm looking at many different things that like the people in the street,
The taxi driver's eyes.
yeah. No, you'd be surprised when you're shooting out of the street. There's a lot of elements that you are paying attention to. There's cat calls that happen. So you have to also start.
Oh, yeah.
Get protective of the dancers at some point. There's people that are getting into your shots. So there's a whole lot of things that happen. So I am fairly comfortable with dance terms, and I ask them specifically what I want them many times. But the dancers that I find myself working with the most are the dancers that are also very comfortable with suggesting their own poses and suggesting things, because as much as I can tell them do this or do that, they know their bodies best. So they know what are the things that they can do better, and but not all dancers are that way. The key is that dancers are trained to follow choreography, as Lois was mentioning. So at some point, that's their training. Not all dancers are just able to devise movement.
Absolutely.
So you have to be, as a photographer, when you're working with dancers, you have to be knowledgeable enough so that you can give them a place to start. But then also you have to also be able to pull back at some point and let them take the lead if they're taking the lead.
Have all of your photographs are that I've seen? There's this multiple dynamics of street and action and cars and people walking by with hand trucks and all kinds of stuff. Do you ever get the urge to just get away to a blank canvas, be in the middle of a desert, or down by the shore, or someplace where the dynamics are just totally different? The look and action and dynamics, where it's just you and this one person without all of this chaos. There's a lot of chaos that goes into your pictures, which is part of the power of it. Do you ever want to start with a clean canvas?
I think I work with what I have in front of me, and that's one of the reasons. I guess if there was a possibility to find those places in New York, I would find them. But I think New York is characteristic of the chaos precisely. So I think that's what I'm trying to portray. So that's where that started, really starting to use the aesthetic that I was learning from street photography and translating into what I'm doing now. But that's not something that I would say no to. I could try it at some point. But right now, I think when John was mentioning it, and it's kind of true, I like the thrill. Definitely like the thrill of like having like all this, all those elements merging together. Because, for example, a lot of times when there's all these people walking by, sometimes it can be sometimes it can interrupt the flow, but a lot of times it makes the picture. And
a lot of times, a lot of your pictures are made by people just walking
by,
ignoring you or looking at you. There's some funny stuff that goes on, and that's half the magic of the picture is all this other stuff in the background.
Yeah, do you find yourself waiting? Okay, hey, I see this guy coming down the street with this something in his hand. I want to get him in there. And
there was it has happened. There was one particular time that happened, and I think it's worth mentioning now. It was a picture that I took where Mr. Bill Cunningham.
I was just going to.
We were looking at that picture earlier.
He was in the picture, and I actually saw him on the corner. We were by Bryant Park, and I saw him arriving on his bike, and the dancer and myself were waiting for the light to change so that we could get into the crosswalk and shoot. And when I saw him, I told her, just run as fast as you can because we need to get into this. Usually I will wait for some people to move out of the way so that we can shoot. But I was like, forget the people now, just run into the street as fast as you can and let's get there as fast as we can. So, because I'm pretty sure that if we get in there, like he's most likely going to shoot.
Just to kind of clarify, he's talking about Bill Cunningham, who's like a legendary New York Times photographer who just passed away.
Yeah. So yeah, and that's a photo that I wouldn't have been able to make anywhere else, and that's part of the beauty of those things that do happen.
And he's taking a picture of you taking the picture. That's magic.
Yeah,
that's wonderful.
I would like to see that picture.
Yeah, right. It's true. You may one day. And there's also a lot of great shots where you're utilizing the architecture of the city and the streets and pipes and buildings and having the dancers kind of conform their bodies to these shapes, and those are incredible as well.
Yeah. So that's part of the challenge of like finding those little things and when they happen, and it's just like magic. So there's a lot of times that we're walking for 3 or 4 blocks and nothing happens. We're just walking, and then suddenly like something like that happens, and it's just like magic.
Hey Lois, can I ask, given the relationship with your work and how you kind of want to take it away from the performance, 2 questions. Do you enjoy dance performances? Do you go and soak them up? And if you don't want to answer that question, you don't have to. And the other question is, how do the dancers feel and the dance community feel to some degree when you're saying, hold on, I'm not worried about the choreography and the narrative. I just want this moment. Is there any pushback sometimes?
Well, I mean, if I'm hired by a dance company to shoot choreography, of course I do that. And I try to maximize it in some way and make sure it's not static or too pose looking, which is often what happens. So yeah, I'm just out to make that dance look very exciting as a photograph, which is different from just collaborating with people with no intention other than to experiment and explore. Dance has a limited vocabulary of movements, and they have to work together in concert in a certain space and according to intervals of time. But the magic for me is the dancers in my studio can just in an instant create a split second that is not part of anything, but they'd never be able to do that in the context of a dance because no takeoff, no landing, and there's no music or whatever. So, and the dancers really like that because I think they feel a bit confined by the constraints of choreography every night, over and over again, years and years and years. Of course, they love doing it, and it's a thrill and a challenge and pleasurable for them. But it's also fun for them to just see how they can make a work of art out of. It's very creative for them, and often then I think actually has inspired them to create and do different things.
I would imagine that they may see something in a photograph that they didn't realize they were even doing, and then try to incorporate that into a bigger piece. Yeah,
it's a challenge for them. I'm sure doing any kind of ballet performance over and over is a bit rote for them. So.
And Omar, do you enjoy going to dance performances?
Yeah.
You do?
I mean, I enjoy the physicality of it, and that comes back from when I was performing. So, I guess as I've gotten older, I see it in a more nostalgic way. But no, I say it laughing, but yeah, because I was part of that at some
You
point.
know you're probably the youngest guy in the room, right? Just to be clear about that, okay? Guy or girl,
Yeah, but
sorry.
I just cannot do anything, any of the things that I used to do. Before I was a mime, I was actually a gymnast. So like I was, my body was somewhere at some
Yeah.
point in my life.
Yeah.
So yeah, I definitely enjoy watching those things, and particularly even better when it's the dancers that I work with that invite me to see their shows, because then I get to see them in a completely different light. So yeah.
Lois, your latest book just came out, and it's doing really, really nicely. What other projects are you working on? You involved in workshops or things of that sort?
Yes, I love to give workshops actually in my studio. So it's it's a very small group of people using my camera system and my lighting system and my dancers, and maybe 7 people at a time, and I guide them. And of course, they have great dancers who can do amazing things. What's really very rewarding for me is that people think what I do is so complicated and so hard, and they never can do it. And when they come to the studio, they realize, of course, this is a guided experience, but it's
Right.
still something that they're actually doing. No one's taking the pictures for them. And so it opens up their whole creativity and imagination. They realize, you know what, it's not that hard, because they see my process isn't that hard.
Right.
And it's not intimidating. They think that they're going to have to know something that they don't have to know, and they see that I don't know everything they think I'm going to know.
How often do you have your workshops?
We do a couple times a year. I have one coming up next October.
It's incredibly refreshing, though. I imagine for a lot of, for me, just to know the way you work is...
Yeah, because they think it's so complicated, and they never can do it. And, as we said, I
No,
work,
both you guys. It's just
Yeah.
incredible what you can get with pretty basic, let's just call it a basic philosophy, not to mention basic setups and gear. We're not talking about high tech. We're not talking about super complicated setups in any way, shape, or form. And you're getting this incredible work. That's great.
There's also a lot of photographers out there that their whole experience of photography is the image on a phone or an iPad or a screenplay. You're still working in prints.
Yes.
Okay. What kind of
Yeah.
printers are you using these days?
Well, I use the 9900 Epson printer.
Okay.
And
That's a 24-inch or 48? Which one is
48.
that? 48. Okay, you got the real guy. Okay, the big
Yeah.
guns. Okay.
And we do it all in-house,
Uh-huh.
so we can keep tweaking as we go, as the prints come out. So for the Moving Still book, we have exhibits now that are going to be traveling, and one just opened at Jacob's Pillow in Beckett, Massachusetts, and we're printing 3 feet by 4 feet, so we could really see the detail in
Did
the
you print
picture.
that big back in the days of
No.
analog?
No.
And what's your experience between the two? Because I know it's a whole different experience. Is it more rewarding to you to work with digital output compared to chemical output?
Well, I don't think that's the difference. I just like the scale of it better.
Right. Okay.
And so, yeah, like I was saying before about the new series, which is basically what I'm exhibiting, not the older anti-gravitational work, you get to see details absolutely that would have been imperceptible just on the screen or in a smaller format. So we're printing on Epson luster paper and mounting it on aluminum, and they're just going to float off the walls, and they'll be traveling to Russia and China and other places. So
It's great stuff. And it's a very different experience than looking at it on an iPhone screen.
it is. I mean, the screen is luminous, but it's
Yeah.
not the same
As walking
the
up to-
tactile, textural, visceral. It comes alive as a print, I think.
Yeah. Yep. And it doesn't go away when the power's gone. That's a beautiful thing.
That's
I like
another
about it.
thing.
It's a great thing. Omar, what's coming up with you?
I'm gonna start traveling, sponsored by Fujifilm. And first up, we're gonna be going to Mexico very soon. And the idea is to follow up with the OCR dance series, but at the same time, I'll be meeting meeting with other ex-photographers in different locations. And the idea is to build up on the digital community and just in the general Fujifilm community of photographers.
Okay, very good. Lois, people want to see your work. Where are they going to?
Yes, they can go to loisgreenfield.com. They can go to find me on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter,
And your books are available on Amazon.
on Amazon.
Okay. Omar, what about yourself?
So you can find me on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook as Omar Z Robles. My website, however, is omarrobles.com. And you can also find prints right there on my website.
Excellent. Thank you, Lois. Thank you, Omar. Thank you, John and Jason, our producers. Give us your opinions on Twitter at BHPhotoVideo with the hashtag BHPhotoPodcast. And please rate and leave a review on iTunes. My name is Alan Weitz, and thank you so much for joining us today.